Hi everyone, welcome back to this class. Today I'd like to talk about a very important concept in branding strategy, branding position. Particularly, I would like to talk about branding position from customer-based brand equity perspective. But before we talk about all these important concepts, let's take a look at it. What is a brand? What do you think? What is a brand exactly? How do you understand the concept of a brand? Of course, some of you would say brand is a company. Just like Google is a company that all the young talents after their graduation, they would love to join the company because it represents an innovation institution. So brand is a company. Brand is a logo. If you are consumers, you always know when you shop for something, you look for the logo. Louis Vuitton, it represents a luxury and high-quality, fashionable image, and that is related to a logo. And of course, the logo implies the company's image. When we talk about image, it is the meaning, the cultural meaning behind the brand that attracts us. Logo instead is just the design, the visual effect of a brand. But no matter what, the three components all represent a brand. And these three components particularly is from brand management perspective. How do you manage a company? How do you design a logo? And how do you embed brand cultural meaning in the companies? But there is another perspective, and which is very important, and I'd like you to pay attention to it, which consider brand as consumers' memory about the exchanged offer. So in other words, brand actually resides in consumers' memory. It is not the company. Think about an example. If you don't know a brand, if you never heard of a brand, the brand doesn't mean anything to you. And it is, although it is an offer, but it means nothing to you. In that sense, we don't consider brand has any effect on consumer. Therefore, consumer's memory is the central of the brand concept. These two perspectives, one is from brand as a company, from manager's perspective, and on the other hand, brand is the memory reside in consumer's mind. This is a perspective from consumer's perspective. I'd like you to keep these two concepts, keep these two perspectives in mind, because these two perspectives will continue to appear in our later lecture sections. Next, let's think about, so what can be branded? Of course, previously I talked about the transition from commodity to good to services to experience and to transformation. All the offers in all these stages of economic status can be branded. So for example, from goods, services, and experience, product, services, retail and distributor, they offer lots of services, also some innovative experience. And websites, when you go on website, you provide certain transaction by yourself and you search for information and sometimes you entertain yourself. And of course, there is some intangible thing that is more related to experience and transformation can be branded. People, particularly those iconic people that inspire us, like sport athlete stars, political candidates, pop singers, these are all people. And particularly now with the social media, each individual, as long as you have a good idea, you can set up your own website and you advertise your own ideology. So people is one form, and this individual people kind of as a brand is more related to transformation. Next, sports, art, entertainment, we all know these is more similar to the concept of public goods. Once you created these things, other people can take it. Sometimes is free for them to enjoy the arts. Geographic location and cities. More and more we find location implies local culture, authentic local culture which is unique to that particular geographic location. And it is, of course, a good target for branding. And of course, idea and causes. Nowadays, we have lots of advanced ideology about what the economy should perform. For example, circular economy is now a worldwide important concept to help the warming of the global environmental issue. These are the things that can be branded. And today, when we discuss the positioning strategy applies to all targets that can be branded. So now let's go back to the perspective of today's major topic, which is customer-based brand equity. So what is it? The definition of customer-based brand equity refers to the differential effect that brand knowledge has on consumer response to the marketing of that product. There are three terminology I'd like you to particularly pay attention to. First, differential effect. This is very important. When you do any branding strategy, you want your brand to stand out from the competitions. So this is the ultimate goal because it will lead to positive profits for the firm and also positive influence to the whole society. So differential effect is one of the goals. Next, brand knowledge. This refers to consumer memory. And it reflects, previously I mentioned, brand, there are two perspectives. One is from managerial perspective. The other hand is from consumer's perspective. And all the branding strategy in this lecture, I always like to contribute the true value to consumer's memory. So in other words, if a brand cannot create favorable image in consumer's memory, then the branding strategy is not considered successful. Finally, is consumer response. You want them to have favorable response. For example, they build positive preference attitude, purchase intention, or even they spread word of mouth about the positive effect of the brand. So let's take a look at the central key point in the customer-based brand equity concept, which is brand knowledge, or in a more academic terminology, we call it brand association. Brand knowledge includes two components. First, brand awareness. It refers to the strength of the memory. It refers to how well can consumer remember the brand. Overall, just remember, I remember Google, everybody remember it. Google, Tongyi in Taiwan is also a very famous brand. Almost everybody know the brand. So the brand awareness is one of the minimum low criteria for brand managers to build their brand, to assess whether their branding campaign is success or not. There are two perspectives of brand awareness. First, it's passive brand recognition. If somebody reminds you, then you can say, oh yeah, I heard of that brand. That is a passive brand recognition. On the other hand, active brand recall is you actively remember the brand. Of course, you will love the brand more so that you will induce some active brand recall. And the brand manager wants their brand to be actively remembered by consumer. Second component in brand knowledge refers to brand image, and that is actually the meaning. Previously, I mentioned brand image. It implies meaning, any cultural meaning, personal meaning associated with the brand. In particular, it is from consumer's perspective, consumer's interpretation. So it actually refers to the content of the brand. This, I like to emphasize, it actually the true value that a brand can offer to consumers, whether they are tangible benefits or intangible benefits. And they are favorable, unfavorable. Sometimes you see the image thing refers to subjective perception. Sometimes you offer something, however, it may trigger some negative perception from consumers' part. For example, McDonald's, the fast food chains, it offers convenient almost everywhere, 24 hours a day. If you're hungry, you can go to McDonald's. It's actually a very good service concept. However, some consumer will criticize that McDonald's use too much garbage type of low nutrition elements in their offer. So they actually promote a fast food, not healthy eating habits concept. So that is some negative image associated with McDonald's brand. So the image refers to whether favorable or unfavorable. And whether the content that the brand built is unique or similar to others. Previously we mentioned, hopefully all the brand managers want to create their brand to be remembered as unique, to stand out from the competition. And that's the ultimate goal of brand positioning strategy. Let's take a look at an example of what is brand knowledge, brand association. This is a study by two academic scholars, and they published their work on Journal of Marketing. They rely on the social media consumer social tags. I believe you post Instagram, Facebook, or Twitters. You are using all those social media, and you are very comfortable using tags, hashtag, to tag some of the meanings, some of the words. Actually, these imply many of the meanings. And the scholars use social media tag to study what are the tags, the social tags that is associated with Google. And they come up with this brand association. There are three elements very important in brand association. First is the strength. In this graph, the strength refers to the width of the line. You can see the line. Some of the line is much more heavier than the other. For example, Twitches, now it stands out from this particular graph. And it refers to the Twitches, refers to people like to tweet, talking about all the things and sharing information on Google. That is the most important, the strongest association that is associated with Google brand. Second, favorability. In this particular study, the favorability is measured by popularity, which means how many people share this particular text online. The more people share, you can see that the graph reflected in a bigger circle size. And from this Google study, we can see search perhaps is the biggest circle, which is the most favorable feature associated with Google. And the third element is unique. Again, we talk about the uniqueness. And of course, uniqueness is in terms of comparing to your competitors. From this current graph, we couldn't see what is unique to Google. But later, I will show you another graph. You will be comparing Google with other two competitors, and you will see what is the uniqueness that is associated with Google. So let's take a review of the sources of brand equity. There are three measurements. One is the strength of the brand association. It can be built by advertising, by consumers' direct experience with the brand. It will strengthen the brand association, or any other word of mouth, the social influence. These are all the means to influence the strength of brand association. Later in this course, we will talk about how to use communication strategy to strengthen the brand association with the brand. Second sources of brand equity is the favorability of brand association. Of course, here we're talking about the content of the brand. And in this class, I would like to emphasize that cultural as a source of innovation to create the content, particularly favorable content for the consumers. The third sources of brand equity is uniqueness. And of course, this is a relative term. You need some study to show that your brand stands out in particular aspect much better than the other competitors. From Google's example, I can first tell you that search is the Google's strength, and it is Google's uniqueness features. Later, I will show you the evidence to prove it. So, what can be associated with the brand? What is the content of the brand? And as I mentioned, this class I like to emphasize culture as a particular source of innovation to create valuable content for a brand. But let's take a look at what can be associated with a brand. There are tangible elements. I think many of these elements you are very familiar with. For example, goods and services, retail outlets, factories where product is produced, usually associated with country of origin effect. Advertising promotions, corporate name, logo can be associated with the brand. Package and labels, if you create a very innovative package, it becomes a strength of the brand. CEOs, the founders of the brand, usually become very valuable source of cultural narratives. And the cultural of country and the location of the country. On the other hand, intangible elements, these are more related to experience and the transformation aspect of brand content. Ideas and beliefs of a corporation. Nowadays, many companies, in response to circular economy, use organic cultural, organic methodology, organic methods to manufacture their products. Corporate heritage, some of particularly those brands with long history, they constantly emphasize their heritage value, which is intangible value that continue throughout the years as their content, the brand association. Corporate narratives, it can carry the meaning of the brands. And events, if you hold events, the event conveys something and also provide environment for consumer to participate in the concept of the brand. Those are the things that can be associated with brands. Later in this class, we will have more opportunity to dig into how to use culture to create meaningful association with the brand. Oh, and corporation, personnel, environment, politics. So let's go back to Google Brand Association example again. Now, I'd like you to take a good look at each of the notes. Each of the black circle, we call it notes, the brand notes. Brand notes is actually the content of the brand. And I'd like you to look at it. Some of them are tangible, some of them are intangible. Can you tell which one is intangible, which one is tangible? And can you classify what kind of concept, what kind of knowledge, what kinds of cultural content it's associated with Google?